Hari Om. Today we will proceed with Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, from verse number 31. Now, from verses 20 to verse number 39, Sri Krishna wanted to discuss 6 main topics. And what are the topics? They are Jnanam, which means knowledge, Karma, which means action, Karta, which means the doer, and Buddhi, which is intellect or understanding. Then he will also talk about Dhriti, or firmness or fortitude, and finally Sukham, or happiness. And all of these 6 topics, which are discussed from verses 20 to 29, Krishna will divide all these 6 categories into 3 types, that is Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. We have already covered the Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic quality of Jnanam, Karma, Karta, and in the last lesson we spoke about in verse number 30. In verse number 30 we spoke about Sattvic Buddhi. What is Sattvic Buddhi? So let us now listen to what is Krishna's definition in verse 31 of what is Rajasic Buddhi. So in verse 31, chapter 18, Lord says, now while Sattvic intellect or Buddhi is very clear, it has a right knowledge, it leads to right actions and ultimately to liberation. Whereas a Rajasic intellect is unclear, confused about ideas of right action, what is liberation, what leads to liberation, what leads to bondage. So the Lord says here in verse number 31, Yaya, with which an individual, Prajanati, understands. Understands what? Ayathavat, wrongly understands. Either wrongly understands or does not understand at all. Therefore, there is a lot of uncertainty or doubt about what? He goes on to say in verse number 31 about dharma, what is right, what is virtue, which is sanctioned by the scriptures. There is some confusion. And what is adharma, what is vice, what is that is prohibited by the scriptures. So a person is confused and what we call, therefore, does not understand the proper division between right and wrong. And as both dharma and adharma are the cause for the future unseen results, which means karma phalam. So a classic example of a Rajasic Buddhi we can take as Arjuna, who was confused on the battlefield whether the act of killing on the battlefield is the right way to do, or which is the duty of a Kshatriya, which Arjuna instead looked upon it as sin. He told Krishna, by killing these warriors, I am committing sin, as we saw in chapter 1, verse 45. But Krishna had already told Arjuna that if you abandon your duty, if you don't fight for dharma, you don't fight to protect dharma, that is a real sin. That is the true sin, and that Krishna told to Arjuna in chapter 2, verse 33. So, Mahabharata war was a dharma yudham, yudham or battle between dharma and adharma. And it was Arjuna's duty as a soldier not to run away from battle, but to fight and what we call uphold dharma. And by not wanting to fight, he will allow adharma to conquer dharma, and that means he will fail in his duty as a soldier. So that was Arjuna's confusion. So the Lord says there is confusion in a Rajasic mind between dharma and adharma, and what else? And with regard to karyam, what is to be done? What is right action? Many people are confused. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I not do this? Should I not do that? So karyam means what is to be done, what is that righteous action, and akaryam. Akarya means what action is to be avoided. So there is some doubts, there is some confusion. And so the consequences of this will have to be faced by the Rajasic person because he's confused, he makes the wrong choices. Therefore, he or she has to face the consequences of his wrong actions. And sometimes we see other people, they are doing so many wrong things. They keep on doing wrong things, but they keep on prospering. They keep on getting richer, stronger, more honor, etc. And we are tempted to think what is wrong if we follow that lifestyle. But we don't realize that for every person, the karma phalam or the unseen result will come at a given time. No one can escape the consequences of wrong action. So we must not judge by other people's actions, but use our own buddhi. So Rajasic people are those who are always vacillating. Sometimes they follow right actions. When they don't get instant results or they are unable to satisfy their desires through right actions, they fall back to unrighteous actions. So the Lord concludes in verse 31 by saying, Saha Buddhi, that type of intellect which is confused, is considered a Rajasic Buddhi, of Rajasic nature. Verse 32 talks about, Sri Krishna talks about the Tamasic Buddhi or intellect. This Tamasic Buddhi is fully convinced about its wrong knowledge. The difference between Rajasic and Tamasic intellect is, for Rajasic intellect, there is no conviction, there is some vacillation, there is some doubt. So a Rajasic person can change and come to the right, what we call attitude or right intellect. But a Tamasic intellect is fully convinced that whatever knowledge I have is the right knowledge. Despite the knowledge being wrong, despite the advice of so many people telling him, what you're doing is not right, but this person is very convinced that what he's doing is absolutely right. And one classic example of a Tamasic Buddhi can be seen in the Ramayana through the character of Raman. So many people, even his own brother Vibhishan, advised him not to go and kidnap Sita, but he refused to listen to anybody. So he was very convinced that he will kidnap Sita and he will not set her free. So it was right for him to hold on to Sita despite knowing that she was the wife of someone else. And despite receiving so much advice to the contrary, he still firmly believed what he was doing was absolutely right. So the Lord says about this Tamasic Buddhi in verse number 32 that that Buddhi is avrita. Avrita means it is covered by tamas. It is overpowered by tamas, by darkness, by laziness, inertia, by procrastination. This is the qualities of tamas. So by which when the tamas overpowers the buddhi of a human being, the Lord says such a person manyate considers adharma, vice or unrighteous conduct, and dharma, which is virtue, righteous conduct, sarvathan, all things worldly or spiritual actions, viparitan, contrary. He sees everything is upside down. What is right he sees as wrong, what is wrong he sees as right. So his whole view of the world, of morality and of righteousness, of unrighteousness, everything is upside down. Totally twisted mind. So the Tamasic intellect has a lopsided view of everything. And because of this, it justifies what is unrighteous, it justifies as righteous conduct, and vice versa. What people are doing right, it justifies that people are doing wrong. So person justifies his right to cheat, his right to rob, his right to kill, because so many people, so many others are prospering by doing it, so it must be the right way of living. And if people are going to be honest or follow a spiritual lifestyle, going to temples, listening to spiritual talks, then the tamasic intellect justifies that as a wrong conduct, a waste of time, right? So whatever they are doing is wrong. So this is the what we call the tamasic type of intellect. And what happens to such people when their intellect is so overpowered by this tamasic gunas? So a person has to wait for some favorable karma in the past to fructify and come into effect. Maybe if he's fortunate, he's performed some good actions in the past life, and these actions fructify, and he meets a right guru or a right friend or a right person who brings him out of this state of darkness also. So the Lord says such kind of intellect which is firmly convinced that right is wrong and wrong is right, he says saha, that intellect is tamasi, of tamasic nature. Now in verse 33, the Lord will talk about dhriti, or effort, or free will. Now free will is a very important quality which is only gifted to human beings. Free will is given to human beings so that they can use this free will to change their direction of life. If they are doing wrong, they have the capability, the ability to change their direction of life. So until they reach the right goal. So a sattvic willpower is that in which a person devotes all his organs of action, all efforts to complete the spiritual journey. All actions are based on dharma, and it involves a lifestyle change. So there is commitment. That is a sattvic dhriti or sattvic willpower. Rajasic willpower is also committed and dedicated, but the goal is not spiritual or inner purity. The Rajasic person is very much focused, determined, and convinced about the goal of money, fame, power, positions. And if he has to destroy others to gain what he wants, he will also use his willpower to destroy. So that willpower of a Rajasic person is driven by greed, ego, anger, etc., totally to attain selfish motives. What about a tamasic willpower? Is that in which a person refuses to put forward any effort, and that also requires willpower not to do anything. Come what may, I will. What we call a couldn't care less attitude. That everything is already destined, everything is already written in the stars. Whatever is going to happen will happen. So what is the point of my putting in my effort? So let us see how first Krishna describes sattvic willpower in verse number 33. The Lord says dhritiya. Dhritiya means dhriti, or the ability to persevere, the willpower cultivated by yogena avya vicharini, through yoga. Such a willpower which is cultivated through yoga. Here yoga means focus, being steadfast on the spiritual goal, never losing focus on the highest goal of human life, that is self-realization. So such an unswerving, single-pointed focus on the highest goal will strengthen the willpower. Thus, the seeker is never willing to compromise for short-term pleasures and gains and deviate from the main goal. And such a person will face any obstacle and never give up the supreme goal. The Lord says, yaya, by which one dharayate, restrains, or rather the right word to use is not restrain but masters, is a master of what? Kriya, all the functions. So what are the functions of a human being? There are basically three functions which are mastered, and which what we call in verse number 30, verse number 33 here, in verse number 33, the three functions which are mentioned here by the Lord in verse number 33, he says this person, dharayate, is a master of the three functions. The Three functions are of the manaha, the mind. So this person is a master of his mind. His actions are not dictated by the whims and fancies of the mind. He is the master of his mind. So we cannot stop our thoughts, but we can choose also not to act on them. If a wrong thought arises in the mind, we have the willpower to decide whether we want to act on the thought or not. So being a master of the mind means using free will to be very conscious and filter out the bad thoughts. Don't act upon them. And when good thoughts arise, act upon them. So that is one, the master of the mind also. The second is what we call here master of the mind. There is given as manaha. Then there is pranaha. Pranaha means the vital forces, which are the physiological functions. That means breathing in and out, the digestive system, the circulatory system. They are all maintained and healthy and well disciplined. So through leading a well-disciplined life, the person is a master of his physiological functions. Breathing, eating, circulation functions, they are all in perfect order. And it's important also to have a control over your lifestyle so that you have a healthy body in order to engage it in the goal that you want. Next is Indriya. Indriya can be divided into two types of groups. One is Karma Indriya, which is 5 organs of action: the hands, the feet, the organ of reproduction, the organ of excretion, and the vocal cords. And the second one is called Jnana Indriyas, which are the 5 organs of perception, how we intake our experiences with the world. That is our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. So all these 10 functions, a person of sattvic nature is a total master of them. He is in full control of his organs of action and organs of knowledge also. So there is discipline in this person's life, and he harnesses the energies of his body, his mind, his senses, and follows a life of dharma also. So the Lord says, Sahadriti, such a kind of fortitude, such a kind of willpower where one is a master of himself, the Lord says is Sattviki, of sattvic nature. So in verse number 34, now the Lord speaks about the Rajasic willpower. And as I said earlier, like a sattvic person also is firm and dedicated, he has willpower to attain a spiritual goal. A Rajasic person also has the willpower, but his goal is only for his own selfish purposes, to get more money, more possessions, power, to satisfy all his pleasures also. And he dedicates ultimate time and effort to attain those, what we call those worldly goals. And even if he puts in time to do some spiritual practices, he even uses prayers and spirituality not to attain purity of mind, but he also uses religion to attain more worldly goals. So the Lord says here in verse number 34, tu. The word tu here means it is a distinction between the type of willpower that is spoken of in the earlier verse. So he says, yaya, which dhritaya, fortitude or willpower, is phala akankshi. Phala means fruit. Akankshi means where one is desirous of fruits or the results, whether it can be a material or sensual in nature. So that willpower which is desirous of some selfish, some personal results, prasangena, with intense attachment. So phala akankshi is hankering for what we don't have. Prasangena is attachment to what we already have. So either the Rajasic willpower is always thinking about how to get what I don't have, and second is how to hold on to what I already have. And full effort and willpower is put towards these two goals, always thinking of themselves. And even as I said earlier, when they do spiritual actions like they give charity, they give dhanam, they do it for name and recognition. They don't do it for to serve society or to serve the Lord. So they are not humble when they give donation or charity. They want some recognition from society also. So, and the thing is that the more and more you're driven by these selfish desires, when desires are interrupted, your goal to attain certain desires are interrupted, it leads to anger, frustration. And the more and more you satisfy your desires, does not bring us peace of mind, it brings about greed. So uncontrolled desires lead to greed, obstructed desires lead to anger. So whichever way you look at it, a rajasic mind is a very troubled mind. So the Lord says, a rajasic mind or rajasic willpower, dharyate, holds on to three very important things. Three things are very, very important for such a rajasic person. He's very firm on these three goals. What is that? Dharma means righteousness, meaning he does all the rituals and prayers for what purpose? For attaining heaven. He wants to attain some pleasures in heaven, or he wants some what we call recognition from society also, right? So prayers and rituals are not performed to please the Lord or to get inner purity, but they are performed in order to get back some punyam, some rewards. Second thing, rajasic person is very firm on is kama, means sense pleasures. So to satisfy all his sense pleasures, he is driven to by his willpower to attain or satisfy or to what you call satisfy all his pleasures. Third is artha or wealth or possessions, and they are willing to put in any effort to get whatever worldly possessions. So the Lord says, Sahadriti, such a willpower is rajasic. Now we come to verse 35, where the Lord talks about tamasic willpower. The Lord says in verse 35, Yaya, that effort by which a person does not vimunchati, give up, eva, verily. Just like a rajasic person clings on to dharma, kama and artha for seeking pleasures and enjoyment, tamasic willpower also clings on to different things. It is also very firm, but it clings on to different things. So tamasic willpower will give priorities to the wrong goals in life, which will cause a spiritual downfall. So 5 qualities in life that the tamasic person wrongly clings on to, uses his willpower, come what may, he will not give up these 5 activities. What are they? Swapanam, as mentioned in verse 35, Swapanam. Here means sleep. Always a tamasic person will find any means, any excuse to indulge in his most favorite practice, and that is sleep. While we say that sleep is important to rejuvenate, everybody needs sleep, but this person we are talking about is addicted to excessive sleeping. Second is bhayam, of fear. Now here when we talk about fear is always plagued with fear of failure or fear of what others will say, always filled with negative thoughts. And due to this fear, he does not want to venture into any activity. He has no self-confidence, he has no faith in God and himself. Third is clinging on to shokam or sorrow, always complaining, always crying about everything in life, never appreciates whatever blessings he has received. 4 is vishadam, despondency, lack of motivation, does not want to put in effort, feels that no matter what effort I put, my faith will not change. And the final one is madam or sensuality, eagerness to enjoy pleasures that are not sanctioned by the scriptures, Here we are talking about decadent pleasures like alcohol, drugs. So he clings on to this kind of things which bring about his own self-destruction, and not only that, destroys those who are also close to him. But he, a tamasic person, is not at all considered about others. So Sri Krishna uses very harsh words to criticize people who indulge in tamasic actions, and he says they are dhurmeda, they are incapable of discrimination. Now, this is very shocking because every human being has got an intellect. The intellect is our organ to help us discriminate between right and wrong. But he says these people are dhurmeda, incapable of discrimination. Even though they have a human form, they live an animalistic life. Because when we don't use our powers of discrimination, we are no different than an animal. As an animal also lives a very programmed life and doesn't think about changing itself. A human being also is very convinced that this is the right lifestyle, doesn't want to listen to any advice, and doesn't want to change his ways of life. So the Lord says, Sahadriti, such a type of willpower is tamasic. So now the Lord has covered this topic up to here, and there is one final topic called Sukham. So Lord will start talking about Sukham in verse number 36. In verse 36, he will talk about what we call the three types of happiness. So verse 37, he'll mention Sattvic Sukham. Verse 38 is Rajasic Sukham. And verse 39 is Tamasic Sukham. And we will come back in the next recording and discuss about these three types of Sukham. Hari Om Tat Sat.